Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Selwood, co-founder and CEO of Grapple, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. We're waiting for folks to filter in. If you have any questions during today's live stream, I'm available on X and most social media as Jack on a Walk or at Ask Grapple. You can also submit questions or chat with me on askgrapple.com. Cool. Well, we're starting a couple minutes late, so let's go ahead and dive in. I have 3 slides today, so really short presentation, and then I primarily want to focus today on a product demo. For the last few months, we've been hard at work on dramatically expanding the data science capabilities for Grapple. And just as a quick refresher, Grapple is a do-it-yourself data analytics platform designed for go-to-market and finance teams. It's great for business users who are non-technical. We might change our slogan to "Stop waiting for your data team and do it yourself," but that's the gist or the idea overall for the platform. Compared to competitors or other products where you have to set up a whole bunch of tools, Grapple's a joy to get started with, and you don't need to know a ton about data or SQL to make use of the product. So let's dive in. And today we're specifically going to talk about revenue analytics, subscription revenue analytics, which from the last year or so, we've been hearing over and over from customers and users that this is something they really struggle with. And so we've built a first-party solution for this into Grapple that extends Grapple's natural language features into working with really advanced financial data. So let's dive in. Here's kind of an example. Let's say you're on a revenue operations team, or maybe just a sales team or an FP&A team inside of a SaaS company, and you're using Stripe for your billing, Salesforce for your CRM, and Zendesk as your help desk. And you want to understand and model the financial performance of the business a little bit better. And you want to bring these 3 data sources together. And so you go and hire a data engineer or several of them. And then that data engineer is going to go buy off-the-shelf solutions and off-the-shelf platforms for a data pipeline to bring all your data together, a data warehouse to store it. And then they'll go set up data modeling software that'll sit on top of the warehouse to shape the data into the format that you need to be able to actually do analytics. And then once you've done all of that work, then you can actually dive in and start doing data analytics on top of this brand new fancy data warehouse with data models that were written for you. And then you can start actually building dashboards. And it's worth noting that all this whole process can take quite a long time. Hiring a data engineer, we'll just say best case, if you don't already have one, or if you need to hire up more because your other data engineers are already busy, can take about a month. Setting up all these tools and setting up a data pipeline in a warehouse, and the modeling software, just the data operation side of this can take a month. And then it can take a month or more to actually do analytics and build these dashboards. And 3 months is a very conservative estimate. It's more a very generous estimate. It's more likely to take you upwards of 6 months, depending on the size of your business. And then you get to the end of this project, and your director of FP&A comes in, and they have a question that's been burning, that's been on their mind for a really long time. And they want to know which of your industries has the strongest net revenue retention or net dollar retention, which is the natural rate of expansion for accounts. And if it's like around 120, like that's really strong. If it's less than 100, that means you're actively shrinking as a business. And this is a pretty standard SaaS question. And all of a sudden, you have to go all the way back. Your data engineer has to go all the way back to the beginning into the data pipeline, update the data models to pull through data to calculate this metric. And this is the predominant way that most businesses work with sort of their technical data, their technical teams, and non-technical folks elsewhere in the business. And this model can work really well for potentially really advanced reports that aren't going to change a lot, maybe like really big data projects. But for day-to-day, this whole process of setting up all these tools and having to always go back to your data engineer every time you want to come up with a new metric, or having to learn really in-depth tools that can be confusing, like Looker or Tableau, this whole system just breaks down, and data teams are constantly running behind, and business users are constantly asking more questions, and they're delayed increasingly by that. We found a stat that 74% of companies are falling behind on their data readiness, meaning their business data isn't available for their business users to make decisions. And so they're running more and further behind. Grapple kind of resets the paradigm for how you work with this data. We don't call ourselves a self-service data platform. We think that's kind of a dirty phrase or dirty word because most self-service tools aren't actually self-service. And so we're calling ourselves do-it-yourself. We're a do-it-yourself platform, and our sole focus is on empowering non-technical users, primarily in go-to-market and finance, to be able to work with data on their own. In a day, you can bring all your data into Grapple. Grapple ships with under the hood and on-demand data warehouse and data pipeline. And if you don't know what those things are, don't worry about it. Just know that you can bring your data into Grapple really quickly. We automate about 80 or 90% of your data modeling. So that's ready right away for you to query your data. And then for our enterprise customers, we can work with you to kind of tweak these models so they're evergreen and live with you as your data updates. And you get real power here. You can share these models, these data models and data with your team. You can export them to drive your Excel models and do financial modeling there. We're not trying to replace Excel. But then Grapple also makes it easy to do-it-yourself ad hoc analysis on the go. We've all sat in a meeting where someone asked, hey, what about net revenue retention for this other industry? Or what does net ARR look like based on this cohort, or other questions like that? And it's really cool if you can answer that question in the meeting instead of having to take a week or two to go get the answer. And so this time when Director of FP&A comes in and says, which industry is strongest NRR, with Grapple, you can answer this question really quickly. So let's dive into the demo, and I'm going to jump over to Grapple here. And for those of you who haven't used Grapple before, I'll kind of take a step back. So here we have Grapple's data library, and it's really easy to bring data sources into Grapple. We support about 30 different data sources today. If you have an integration you'd like to see, just let us know. It's very easy for us to add more data sources. And we primarily today support CRMs and billing data and product usage data in SQL databases to kind of give you an idea. If you're not ready to fully connect, for example, your entire Salesforce instance, you can just upload a CSV and get started with that. So I've connected my Stripe data, and I'm going to jump over here to this invoices project, which is a view of my Stripe invoices in Grapple. And this is all mock data for a fake business, not representing Grapple or any of our real customers. And I want to just kind of talk a little bit about what's difficult about generating a view of your subscription revenue that's meaningful for your board and investors. So again, here we're looking at our Stripe invoices. In this first column, we have the description, which in Stripe usually means the company name, the status of the invoice, what product was sold, the quantity, the start and end dates for that invoice. Here we're primarily thinking about like multi-year enterprise SaaS deals where the contract, probably spans 12 or 24 months. And then we have an amount that represents the total contract value for this customer. And we can also see that Aimbu also, so their first invoice was this period right here, was 2024 through 2026. And then it looks like they have a planned renewal next year for this amount. And it looks like their spend with us is going to actually increase a little bit. So that's pretty cool. And let's scroll down to another example. Avam, for example, started in 2021. They renewed 2 years later, and then it looks like they actually churned earlier this year. It'd be really helpful to be able to automatically calculate for this first customer how much they're planning to expand in 2026. And it would also be really helpful for this customer, Avam, to be able to automatically recognize that they've churned all the way back just a couple months ago, actually in August. And these are the sorts of questions and data challenges that a lot of finance teams struggle. You might pull subscription data out of Stripe, for example, and pull that into an Excel model and track like month-over-month customer movements. But this can be really tedious. And if you're selling multiple products and you're trying to track like which products customers are canceling or which products drive the most expansion, answering questions like that can be really cumbersome. I'm going to start working with this data to help us understand what MRR might look like, and then cut over to a new project in Grapple. So again, this is invoice data. We can see a start and end, and we can see an amount. But what we don't know from this amount is like how much of that amount we can recognize every month. And so I'm going to come to Ask Grapple, and I'm going to create what's called a formula. And I'm going to go, what is the total length per invoice line item in months? And so this will take end minus start in months and tell me how long each contract is. And we have some rounding issues, which we can fix a little bit later. And so if we divided the amount by the length in months, then we'd actually have an idea of like what MRR would be for this customer. So let's come in and do another formula and go formula amount divided by length. And now we'll start to understand our MRR. And so we'll see this load. And so, okay, here we go, amount per length, and I'm just going to rename this to MRR to kind of make it a little bit easier to look at. And then let's come up to Grapple and add a number, and let's go sum MRR. And you might think, okay, this is going to be a pretty good view of the business that our total MRR is 489,000, but that's actually not the whole picture because we're double counting MRR in this scenario. For example, with this first customer, we can only calculate or we can only consider the net expansion from their first invoice to their second invoice, new MRR. We can't double count it. And right now we're double counting it. With subscription revenue, you're always calculating how much you're net adding or net losing. And calculating this in spreadsheets or other methods requires a lot of either SQL models or just a ton of formulas and macros. And Grapple makes this really easy. So we kind of step through here, like kind of the fundamentals of why it's hard to track data like this. But let's actually dive in and I can start to show you some of the new features we're launching today to make this even easier. So here I've jumped over to a project called Annual Recurring Revenue, and this is that same Stripe invoice data. And in the background, we've applied a little bit of logic based on the way that this business wants to recognize their revenue. And you can see that we have some new columns. So we can see, for example, that starting MRR going into this month was 0, and they ended at 3,900. And so we can see that the net ARR then is 46,000. And we still sort of have the overall data from the invoice over here. But what Grapple's done for me is it's figured out that this month, December in 2024, was the first time this customer showed up in the system, and so we can classify that customer as new. And they added $46,000 in ARR, and the difference here between ending MRR and ARR is obviously just times 12. And so this customer, it looks like they didn't have any movement. So they started in December of 2024 and they didn't have any net changes for quite a while. And then they had some expansion right here, which is awesome. They net added 33,000 in ARR, which is great. And then if we keep going, we can see that this is all future dated, so it's not automatically marking them as churned yet. But if we come into this other customer, Avum, we can see that they signed up here. And if we keep scrolling down, we can see that they expanded. And then if we keep going, we'll eventually see that they churned. And so this seems really simple, but from just basic Stripe invoice data, we're able to reverse engineer all of the per customer per month net movements based on the context of when the customer started, what they paid last month, and what they're going to pay next month. This is saving you a ton of time, right? Again, the two options you have to get this level of granular data is to go hire a data engineering team that's going to write really big data models, pay for very expensive SaaS finance software that's not always accurate, or try and cobble this together yourself in Excel. And with Grapple, even if you're not going to do your forecasting in Grapple, we can at least generate all this data and make it available for your finance team or for your other teams to work with in Grapple. So you're getting really high quality data. And this updates live whenever your Stripe invoice data changes. We can pull that in. And this is a pretty simple business, but if you have multiple product lines or if you have different revenue recognition standards, we can also encode that in here as well. And for Grapple's enterprise customers, sort of the world is yours. We can customize this to fit your exact business. And even with some of those custom data models, we can use natural language on top of all of this. So the moment you've all been waiting for is probably seeing me put this together in an actual waterfall visualization. So if I come here to Ask Grapple, we have a new waterfall visualization type. And so I can do something like sum net ARR by period quarter, by movement. And this will now look at all the columns and generate for me a visualization, which is pretty awesome. And so we'll see here now what that all looks like. And this business has existed for quite a while. So I'm going to come down and filter and go period is before 2024, for example, just to kind of filter this data set down so I can see the origin of this business a bit more closely and that updated and we can see it right here. And so just to explain, if you're not familiar with what an ARR waterfall is, we can see the starting and ending ARR for each period. So for example, in Q3 of 2021, this business went in with about $500,000 in ARR. They added 177K in ARR. They expanded from existing accounts 85K in ARR. And they didn't have any churn or contraction, which is great. And then they ended the quarter at about 780K ARR. So you're getting really granular details here. And this gives you the ability as you're running retros or presenting to your board to feel really confident about how the business is doing doing. Or triage, for example, if we jump forward, we can see that there was quite a bit of churn in Q4 of 2023. For example, if we wanted to come in here into movements, we could type in churn and narrow in on which customers canceled. And maybe I export this list and send it to my customer success team for them to take a look at. So pretty cool that we can generate all of this with just natural language and some really quick data modeling. No need to spend 6 months or toil away for hundreds of hours in Excel. But let's do a couple of other things. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go number, and I'm going to go distinct description by period quarter. And so I want to know the count distinct of descriptions. And I'm just going to tweak this really quick. It looks like it came through not entirely how I wanted. So I'm going to go period descending. And now we should see here, okay, this is a better idea for the business. So we can see, for example, that in Q4 of 2022, compared to the prior quarter, we added 5 customers and grew, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to rename this to active customers. We could also, for example, if we just want a top line number and go, what is current ARR? We can just ask Grapple, what is current ARR? And it should do it. Let's check its math. It's getting the max of net ARR. I'm going to tweak that. And instead, if we sum our net ARR, that'll give us exactly what our current ARR is. And so we can see here that it's 1.3 million, which is pretty cool. We can do one more thing that's kind of advanced though. Let's do sum number and let's say sum net ARR by period quarter. Tracking the net growth of your business or acceleration is one of the strongest signs that an investor looks for before investing. And so let's just take a look at this and we'll just rename this to net ARR. And we can see here, for example, that net ARR, that the amount of new ARR added in Q4 of 2022 was almost 200,000 compared to 150 in Q3. And so not only is this business growing, but it's also accelerating because it's adding more net ARR as it grows. So pretty cool that we're able to calculate that so quickly. This is just the beginning of what we're doing with subscription revenue analytics in Grapple. We're working on some awesome new features so you can start to correlate revenue metrics like these with your Salesforce data and with your Zendesk data so that you can ask that mystical question or that meaningful question, what is NRR by industry? And so you'll be able to correlate this with other data sources so you can understand based on really any dimensions of your customers what your revenue looks like. So if you'd like the same level of data to either drive your Excel models or to open up do-it-yourself analytics for your business, get in touch. We can move really fast, and something we're proud of is that we can get you an ARR waterfall in just a couple days. So again, my name is Jack Selwood, co-founder, CEO of Grapple. It was so fun showing you our new ARR waterfall features today, and let me know how we